Hello, everyone, and welcome to another meaningful conversation with Maya. Today, we are discussing a topic that affects all of us at some point in life: how to stay motivated during tough times. Maya, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to this. It's one of those topics where the standard advice often feels a bit hollow when you're actually in the thick of it, so I'm excited to dive in.
Maya, why do people often lose motivation during difficult times?
I think it's usually because our brains are just trying to protect us. When we're in a crisis, the fight or flight part of our brain takes over, and all that high level motivation for long term goals just gets pushed aside for basic survival. It's hard to care about a 5 year plan when you're just trying to get through the next 5 minutes. Do you think people tend to be too hard on themselves when that happens?
Is it normal to have days when we don't feel motivated at all?
Absolutely. It's not just normal, it's practically a human requirement. Expecting yourself to be a powerhouse of productivity every single day is a bit like expecting a phone to stay at 100% without ever plugging it in. You're eventually going to hit a low battery mode, and that's usually when your mind is telling you it's time to recharge. Do you feel like those off days are usually seen as failures or just necessary breaks?
What is the first thing someone should do when they are feeling discouraged?
The first thing is usually to just stop fighting it for a second. When you're discouraged, there's this instinct to panic and try to force motivation back into existence, but that usually just makes you feel more exhausted. I'd suggest starting with a tiny, non negotiable win, like making the bed or even just drinking a glass of water. Something so small it's impossible to fail at. It proves to your brain that you're still capable of taking action, even if it's a tiny one. Does that feel too simple to be effective, or does it make sense?
How can setting small goals help during difficult periods?
And go. Small goals act like a ladder. When you're in a dark place, looking at the top of the mountain is just overwhelming. It makes the goal feel impossible, which leads to more discouragement. But focusing on just the next rung of the ladder, like just finishing one email or reading 5 pages of a book, makes the objective manageable. It creates a momentum loop. You finish one tiny thing, you get a little hit of dopamine, and that gives you just enough energy to try the next one. Do you think people struggle more with picking the goal or actually starting the first one?
How important is maintaining a daily routine?
Routines are like the guardrails for your life. When everything feels chaotic or out of control, a routine gives you a predictable structure to lean on. It removes the decision fatigue of having to figure out what to do next, which is a huge relief when your mental energy is already low. That said, there is a balance. If a routine becomes a rigid cage, it can actually feel suffocating. I think the key is having a few anchor points in the day that stay the same, even when everything else is falling apart. Do you think
What
a
role,
strict routine is more of a safety net or a source of pressure for most people?
what role does positive self-talk play in staying motivated?
It's basically the internal dialogue that determines if you're a supportive coach or a harsh critic in your own head. When you're struggling, the voice that says, I'm failing, is a lot louder than the voice that says, I'm having a hard time, but I'm still here. Changing that narrative doesn't mean pretending everything is perfect. It's just about being a bit more honest about your effort. If you spoke to a friend the way you speak to yourself during a tough time, would you still have that friend?
Can surrounding yourself with supportive people make a difference?
Absolutely. Your environment is basically the invisible hand that shapes your mood. If you're surrounded by people who are constantly complaining or projecting their own stress, it's almost impossible to keep your own head above water. But when you have people who can either hold space for you or just make you laugh when you don't want to cry, it changes the whole equation. It's not about having a huge cheering section, it's just having a few people who actually get it. Do you think most people realize how much their circle is actually draining them, or do they just accept it as part of the struggle?
How can people avoid comparing themselves to others?
Comparison is the ultimate thief of joy, especially when you're comparing your behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel. In the age of social media, we're seeing a curated, filtered version of people's lives, and it's so easy to forget that they're dealing with their own messes and failures off camera. One of the best ways to fight that is to shift the focus from am I as good as them to am I better than I was yesterday? It's a much fairer fight because you're the only one with the same starting line and the same obstacles. Do you think that shift in perspective is actually possible for most people, or is the urge to compare just too ingrained in us?
Why is celebrating small achievements important?
Because it trains your brain to associate effort with reward. When you're in a tough spot, your brain tends to develop a sort of negativity bias where it only notices what's still broken or how far you still have to go. If you only celebrate the big win at the end, you're basically starving yourself of motivation for 99% of the journey. By acknowledging the small stuff, like finally answering that one scary email or just getting out of bed on a bad day, you're giving yourself a little hit of dopamine that tells your system, hey, we're actually making progress. It keeps you from burning out because it transforms the process from a grueling marathon into a series of tiny, winnable games. Do you think we've been conditioned to only value the big results, and that's why we ignore the small wins?
What role does self care play in staying motivated?
It's basically the fuel in the tank. If you're running on empty, no amount of positive thinking or goal setting is going to make you move. Self care isn't just bubble baths and face masks, it's the basic maintenance sleep, decent food, movement that allows your brain to actually function well enough to feel motivated. When you're depleted, your capacity to handle stress shrinks, and the smallest hurdle can feel like a mountain. Taking care of yourself is how you build the resilience to keep going when things get heavy. Do you think people usually see self care as a luxury or a necessity?
It's a necessity.
I couldn't agree more. It's a bit of a tragedy that it's still framed as something you treat yourself with rather than just basic survival. If you don't maintain the machine, it's eventually going to stop working. Do you think that pressure to always be on makes people feel guilty for taking the basic care they actually need?
I don't. I don't think so. My next question is, how can people stay hopeful when results take a long time?
This is a tough one because we're so conditioned for instant gratification. Our brains love the quick win. So when the reward is months or years away, it's easy to feel like you're just shouting into a void. I think the trick is to stop looking for the result and start falling in love with the process. If you can find a way to make the daily habit itself the reward instead of just the destination, the waiting doesn't feel so draining. It's like planting a seed. You can't keep digging it up every day to see if it's growing, or you'll just kill it. You have to trust the system you've put in place and focus on the tending, not the bloom. Does that
Finally,
feel realistic to you, or does it sound like something from a motivational poster?
Maya, what is the most important message people should remember during tough times?
That the struggle itself isn't a sign of failure, it's just part of the human experience. I think the most important thing is to remember that you're not a robot. You're allowed to be tired, you're allowed to be overwhelmed, and you're allowed to move at a slower pace than everyone else for a while. The version of you that is struggling is just as valuable as the version of you that is winning. As long as you're still here, and you're still trying, even in the tiniest, most invisible ways. You're doing enough. Be kind
Thank
to
you, Maya,
yourself.
for sharing
Trust
these
the
encouraging
process.
insights. Today's discussion reminded us that staying motivated during tough time is not about being positive every moment. It's about continuing to move forward, one step at a time. Thank you to everyone for listening, and we will see you in our next conversation.
It was my pleasure. I'm always here whenever you're ready to dive into another one. Take care. I'm already thinking of a few topics we could tackle next. Since you're into the intersection of AI and human growth, maybe we could explore how to handle the fear of being replaced by technology, or even how to build a second brain using AI to reduce mental clutter. Any of those sound interesting to you?